Hooves drummed the rhythm of victory when suddenly the world turned upside down. Emperor, a magnificent black stallion with a white star on his forehead, caught the fence at full gallop. In a split second, 300 kilograms of muscle and grace crashed onto the track's sand with a deafening crack. The crowd's roaring cheer transformed into a collective gasp of horror. Sharp pain pierced the stallion's ear, then silence was shattered by his own piercing groan. "Back! Give him space!" someone shouted while Emperor unsuccessfully tried to rise on his trembling legs. His left front leg folded like a broken branch. The sand beneath him turned red. Tony Martinez, his jockey, was already getting up nearby, spitting blood, but alive. Emperor's owner, James Reddington, watched this nightmare from the VIP box, clutching an unfinished whiskey in his hand. 6 generations of breeding the finest racehorses, $2 million in investments, and 3 years of training, all gone in an instant. His face remained cold, but his knuckles whitened from tension. Torn ligaments and an open fracture. The veterinarian announced unceremoniously in the stable after examination. Emperor, sedated, was breathing heavily, his eyes reflecting pain and confusion. "He will never race again, Mr. Reddington." James nodded, avoiding the stallion's gaze. "How much would rehabilitation cost?" "If you just want him to walk, minimum 8 months of rehabilitation. Tens of thousands of dollars, with no guarantees." "And other options?" James asked, his voice suddenly as dry as the track's sand. The veterinarian paused. "Most owners in your situation choose humane euthanasia, or possibly a sale. There are people who take injured racehorses for other purposes." On the other side of the state, Sarah Collins was working on the fence of her small rehabilitation farm. At 50, she was a strong woman with a face weathered by sun and wind. She had been running Second Life Farm for 15 years, rescuing horses from slaughter and oblivion. The phone in her worn jeans pocket unexpectedly rang. She wiped her hands on her pants and looked at the unfamiliar number. "Mrs. Collins? This is Tim Johnson from Oakwood Racetrack. We have a horse injured during the race. The owner wants to get rid of him quickly." Sarah sighed. She had heard this story hundreds of times. "How serious is the injury?" "Serious enough. Torn ligaments, fracture. But he's young, strong, with proper care." "How much is the owner asking?" she interrupted, knowing her budget was limited. "Actually, he's willing to give him away for free. Just wants to avoid, well, you understand." Sarah pressed her lips together. Yes, she understood. Putting down a champion would be shameful for his reputation. Selling him for meat? Even worse. The owner was looking for a way to wash his hands with a clear conscience. "I'll come tomorrow morning," she replied, already knowing she couldn't refuse. "Prepare the paperwork." Returning to the house, Sarah stopped at the stairs. Her 12-year-old niece Lizzie, who had recently moved in with her after an accident that took her parents and left her in a wheelchair, sat by the window, staring into nothingness. Sarah hesitated, doubting if she could handle another broken creature. "Lizzie," she began, "how about a trip to the racetrack tomorrow? Seems like we'll have a new resident." The girl didn't even turn her head. But for a moment, just a moment, Sarah noticed a spark in her eyes, the first in long weeks since the tragedy. The morning air was crisp when Sarah pulled her battered pickup truck into Oakwood Racetrack's delivery entrance. The contrast between her mud-splattered vehicle and the pristine racing facility couldn't have been starker. Lizzie sat silently beside her, fingers fidgeting with the blanket covering her legs. "You okay, kiddo?" Sarah asked, stealing a glance at her niece. Lizzie nodded without looking up. "Does it hurt?" "The horse, I mean." "Yes," Sarah answered honestly. "But that's why we're here." Tim Johnson met them at the stable entrance, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Collins, I've got the release forms ready." "The owner, well, he's not coming. Already left for Kentucky yesterday." "Of course he didn't," Sarah muttered, taking the paperwork. "Where's our patient?" Tim led them through the immaculate stables to the last stall. Emperor stood with his head hanging low, his once gleaming coat now dull. A thick bandage encased his left front leg, and his powerful body seemed diminished somehow. When he heard them approach, he raised his head slightly, dark eyes regarding them with cautious interest. "He hasn't eaten much," Tim said. "Vets gave him painkillers this morning for the transport." Sarah approached slowly, making soft clicking sounds with her tongue. Emperor's ears flicked forward. "Hey there, big guy," she whispered. "Rough couple of days, huh?" From her wheelchair at a distance, Lizzie observed with unexpected intensity. Emperor's gaze shifted to her, and for a brief moment, horse and girl locked eyes. "Can I come closer?" Lizzie asked, her voice barely audible. Sarah hesitated. "Let's get him home first. He's had enough stress." Loading Emperor into the trailer proved challenging. He balked at the ramp, nostrils flaring at the unfamiliar smell. Sarah stood patiently, holding his lead rope without pulling. "Come on, handsome. This isn't so bad." After several tense minutes, the stallion finally stepped cautiously into the trailer, his injured leg barely touching the ground. The drive back was slow and careful. Every bump in the road made Sarah wince, imagining Emperor struggling to keep his balance. Lizzie remained silent, occasionally glancing back toward the trailer. "He was famous, right?" she finally asked. "3 consecutive wins last season," Sarah replied. "Worth millions until yesterday. And now nobody wants him?" Sarah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Some people only see value in what something can do for them, not in what it is. Lizzie turned to stare out the window again. "I know." The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken pain. Second Life Farm appeared on the horizon, 30 acres of gently rolling pastures enclosed by white fencing that had seen better days. 5 other horses grazed in the distance. The modest farmhouse and large red barn stood like sentinels against the afternoon sky. "Home sweet home," Sarah announced as she carefully backed the trailer up to the barn entrance. Emperor was even more reluctant to exit than he had been to enter. After 20 minutes of gentle coaxing, he finally took tentative steps onto solid ground. His eyes widened at the unfamiliar surroundings, ears swiveling to catch every sound. "This is his stall," Sarah explained as she led him into a spacious box bedded with fresh straw. "It opens to a small private paddock when he's ready." Lizzie wheeled herself closer now that they were home. "His leg looks really bad." "It is," Sarah confirmed, hanging up a water bucket. "We'll need to change those bandages soon, give him his medication, and make him comfortable." "Can I help?" Lizzie asked. Sarah looked at her niece in surprise. It was the first time since the accident that Lizzie had volunteered for anything. "Of course you can. You can start by talking to him while I get his medicine ready." Horses like gentle voices. Left alone with Emperor, Lizzie wheeled herself to the stall door. The massive horse regarded her warily. "Hi," she said awkwardly. "I'm Lizzie. I guess we're both kinda broken, huh?" Emperor snorted softly. "My parents died 2 months ago," she continued, the words spilling out easier to the horse than they ever had to her aunt. "Car crash. I was in the back seat. Now my legs don't work and everyone looks at me like I'm made of glass." The horse took a halting step closer, his breath warm against her outstretched hand. "Does it make you mad?" she whispered. "That they just threw you away when you got hurt?" Emperor lowered his head until his muzzle was level with her face. For a moment, they simply breathed the same air. Sarah returned to find them this way, medicine forgotten in her hands as she watched the silent communion between 2 wounded souls. That night, a thunderstorm rolled in. Lightning illuminated the farmhouse in harsh flashes as rain pounded against the windows. Lizzie lay awake, listening to the storm and thinking about Emperor alone in his stall. A particularly loud crack of thunder made her jump. Then she heard it, a frantic whinny from the barn, followed by crashing sounds. "And Sarah," she called, but another thunderclap drowned her voice. Without thinking, Lizzie pulled herself into her wheelchair and grabbed the raincoat hanging on her bedroom door. The ramp at the side of the house led directly to the muddy yard. Rain immediately soaked through her pajamas as she wheeled herself toward the barn, fighting against the wind and slick ground. Inside, the other horses were restless but calm. Emperor, however, was in a full panic. He reared awkwardly despite his injury, smashing against the stall door with such force that the wood was beginning to splinter. "Emperor, Stop, Lizzie cried, but the terrified horse paid no attention, wild-eyed and thrashing. She wheeled closer, heart racing. One kick from those powerful hooves could kill her instantly. Another crash of thunder sent Emperor into renewed frenzy, and she heard the sickening sound of his bandage tearing. "Please," she begged, her wheeled chair now just outside his stall. "You'll hurt yourself worse." The horse reared again, and this time Lizzie did the only thing she could think of. She began to sing. A simple lullaby her mother had sung to her, her voice trembling but growing steadier with each note. Emperor froze, forelegs still raised, breathing hard through flared nostrils. Slowly, painfully, he lowered himself, injured leg hovering above the ground, eyes fixed on the small figure before him. Lizzie kept singing, even as she heard the barn door open behind her and Sarah's panicked voice calling her name. "Elizabeth and Collins." Sarah stood frozen in the barn doorway, rainwater pooling at her feet. "What were you thinking?" Lizzie's song trailed off, but her eyes remained fixed on Emperor. The stallion's breathing had slowed, though he still trembled with each lightning flash. "He was scared," she said simply. "I heard him from my room." Sarah cautiously approached, assessing the situation. Emperor's bandage was partially torn, revealing the angry wound beneath. The stall door had a splintered crack running halfway down its length. "You could have been killed," Sarah whispered, her anger giving way to fear. "If he'd broken through that door." "But he didn't," Lizzie countered. "He listened to me." Sarah knelt beside the wheelchair, heedless of the wet straw. "Honey, I understand you want to help, but you can't take risks like this. These are 1,000-pound animals with minds of their own." Emperor nickered softly, drawing both their attention. Despite his evident pain, he had moved closer to Lizzie, his massive head extending toward her. "See?" Lizzie placed her hand on his muzzle. "He knows I'm not afraid of him." Sarah sighed, recognizing the stubborn set of Lizzie's jaw, the same expression her sister used to have. "Let's fix his bandage, then get you dried off before you catch pneumonia." For the next half hour, they worked together by lantern light. Sarah carefully rewrapped Emperor's leg while Lizzie held the light and spoke soothingly to him. The horse remained surprisingly still despite the continuing storm. "You've got the touch," Sarah admitted as they headed back to the house. "But we're still going to talk about appropriate decision-making tomorrow." Lizzie nodded, though a small smile played at the corners of her mouth, the first genuine smile Sarah had seen since the funeral. The next morning, Sarah found her niece already dressed and waiting by the door, a veterinary manual open in her lap. "It says here that horses with ligament injuries need controlled exercise after the initial healing period," Lizzie announced without preamble. "And that swimming is ideal because it builds strength without weight-bearing stress." Sarah raised an eyebrow as she poured her coffee. "We don't have a pool, Lizzie." "But we have the pond," Lizzie persisted. "You told me yourself you used it for rehabilitation before." "For minor injuries, yes. Emperor's case is different. The vet's coming today to give us a proper assessment." Dr. Helen Myers arrived mid-morning, her weathered face creasing into a smile when she saw Lizzie. They had known each other for years, with Helen providing discounted services to Second Life whenever possible. "So this is our famous patient," Helen said as she examined Emperor. The stallion was calmer today, though he still flinched when she touched his injured leg. "Will he walk normally again?" Lizzie asked, unable to hide her concern. Helen's expression grew serious. "With proper care, yes, but racing is out of the question. The bone has been set, but these ligaments..." She gestured to the ultrasound image on her portable device. "There's significant damage, but he won't need to be put down?" Lizzie's voice cracked on the last words. "No, sweetheart. He's got fight in him." Helen smiled reassuringly. "Though his treatment won't be cheap. He'll need specialized medication, possibly even surgery." After the examination, Sarah walked Helen to her truck, their conversation shifting to hushed tones outside Lizzie's earshot. "I'll do what I can on the billing, Sarah, but this is going to be expensive," Helen warned. "The kind of rehab he needs doesn't come cheap." Sarah nodded, her gaze drifting to the mailbox where another bank notice likely waited. "I'll figure something out. I always do." "And the girl?" Helen asked softly. "How's she handling everything?" "Until yesterday, I wasn't sure she'd ever smile again," Sarah admitted. But something about that horse, they seem to understand each other. Helen squeezed her friend's shoulder. Sometimes the best medicine doesn't come in syringes. Over the following weeks, Lizzie became Emperor's self-appointed physical therapist. Every morning, she would wheel herself to his stall with carrots hidden in her pockets. She read to him from her mother's old books while he stood beside her, occasionally nudging the pages with his velvety nose. Sarah watched their bond strengthen with equal parts joy and trepidation. She'd seen how quickly fortunes could change for rescue horses, and for people too. One morning, Lizzie appeared at breakfast with a determined look. "I want to try water therapy with Emperor today." Sarah set down her coffee cup. "Lizzie, we've talked about this." "He's still." "It's been 4 weeks," Lizzie interrupted. "Dr. Helen said we could start gentle exercise after a month. I've been researching everything, and the swelling is down." "Please, Aunt Sarah." Sarah studied her niece, the eager light in her eyes that had been absent for so long, the color returning to her cheeks. How could she say no? "We'll start small," she conceded, "and only if the weather holds." The shallow end of the pond had a gradually sloping bank that Sarah had reinforced years ago for exactly this purpose. By noon, they had Emperor fitted with protective water boots and were slowly leading him toward the edge. The stallion balked at first, nostrils flaring at the unfamiliar scent of algae and water. "It's okay," Lizzie called from where Sarah had positioned her wheelchair in the shade. "Just try it." Sarah stood patiently at Emperor's side, neither pulling nor pushing, simply waiting. After several false starts, the stallion finally placed one hoof in the water, then another. His injured leg he kept raised, unwilling to test it. "That's it," Sarah encouraged. "Nice and easy." As the cool water rose to Emperor's knees, something remarkable happened. The tension in his powerful shoulders eased visibly. Sarah guided him a few steps deeper, and the stallion released a long breath, as if in relief. "He likes it," Lizzie exclaimed. "Look at his face." Emperor did indeed appear more relaxed than they'd seen him yet. The water's buoyancy was taking pressure off his injury, perhaps for the first time since the accident. Sarah led him in gentle circles, allowing his injured leg to float naturally. After 10 minutes, they returned to shore, where Lizzie waited with towels and treats. "This was a good idea," Sarah admitted as they dried Emperor's legs. "We'll make it part of his routine." As if understanding, Emperor lowered his great head to Lizzie's level and blew softly through his nostrils. "See that?" Sarah said. "That's horse for thank you." Lizzie beamed, reaching up to stroke his forehead. "You're welcome." The moment of triumph was interrupted by the sound of tires on gravel. Sarah looked up to see a sleek black SUV pulling into the driveway, its polished surface out of place among the farm's weathered buildings. A tall man in an expensive suit stepped out, surveying the property with calculating eyes. When his gaze fell on Emperor, something flickered across his face, recognition, followed by something darker. "Can I help you?" Sarah called, instinctively moving between Emperor and the stranger. The man smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I believe you can. James Reddington." He extended a manicured hand. "I understand you have something that belongs to me." "Mr. Reddington," Sarah said, her voice carefully neutral. "I was told Emperor was surrendered willingly. I have signed release forms." James straightened his Italian silk tie. "A misunderstanding. My stable manager overstepped his authority while I was away." His gaze flicked to Emperor, then to Lizzie. "I've come to rectify that error." Lizzie wheeled herself forward. "You can't take him." James regarded her with the practiced smile of someone unaccustomed to being contradicted. "Young lady, that horse represents a significant investment. While I appreciate your attachment, business is business." "What business?" Sarah challenged. "You abandoned him when he couldn't race anymore." James's smile tightened. "I received new information regarding his rehabilitation potential. Several breeding operations have expressed interest, despite his injury." Emperor shifted nervously behind them, sensing the tension. Lizzie reached back to touch his leg reassuringly. "He's happy here," she said, her voice small but determined. "Happiness isn't relevant," James replied dismissively. "Now, shall we discuss appropriate compensation for your trouble, or must I involve my attorneys?" Sarah's heart sank. She couldn't afford a legal battle against someone like Reddington. "May I speak with you privately?" she asked, gesturing toward the house. James nodded curtly and followed her, leaving Lizzie and Emperor by the pond. Inside the farmhouse's modest kitchen, Sarah offered James coffee, which he declined with barely disguised disdain. "Let's be direct," he said. "Name your price. I'm prepared to be generous for your—" He paused, searching for a word. "Charitable work." Sarah leaned against the counter. "Emperor isn't merchandise, Mr. Reddington. He's a living creature who's suffered trauma. The stress of another relocation could reverse weeks of healing. I assure you, he'll receive excellent care. Until the next time he's no longer profitable," Sarah countered. James's expression hardened. "Mrs. Collins, let me be clear. That horse is legally mine. I allowed a misunderstanding to persist temporarily, but my patience has limits." Sarah felt a chill despite the warm kitchen. "The forms, signed by an employee without authorization," he cut in. "I could press charges for receiving stolen property if I were so inclined." Sarah stared at him, recognizing the threat for what it was. "When would you take him?" "Today. My trailer will arrive within the hour." Through the window, Sarah could see Lizzie with her forehead pressed against Emperor's neck, her small shoulders shaking. "Give us 2 weeks," she said suddenly. 2 weeks to prepare him for transport, and— She swallowed hard, to say goodbye. James checked his watch impatiently. 1 week, and I'll need a $5,000 deposit against any further damage to my property." $5,000? Sarah's voice rose in disbelief. "That's insurance," he interjected smoothly. "Or I can take him now." After Reddington left, Sarah found Lizzie still at Emperor's side, her face streaked with tears. "He can't take him," Lizzie pleaded. "He doesn't care about Emperor. He'll just hurt him again." Sarah knelt beside the wheelchair. "We have 1 week, honey. I tried for more time, but 1 week until what? Until Emperor gets sent away to be some breeding machine? Until everything good is taken away again?" Lizzie's voice cracked with emotion. Sarah had no answer that wouldn't sound like a lie. That night, Lizzie refused dinner. Through her bedroom door, Sarah could hear muffled sobs. The bank notices on the kitchen table seemed to mock her. Second Life Farm was already 3 months behind on the mortgage. There was no money for legal fees, let alone Reddington's deposit. Morning brought rain and with it, unexpected visitors. Helen arrived first, carrying medical supplies. "Thought I'd check on our patient," she said, but her eyes conveyed a deeper message of support. By noon, 3 more vehicles had pulled up. Neighbors and former clients of Second Life, alerted by Helen to the farm's troubles, arrived bearing casseroles, checkbooks, and determined expressions. "We heard about Reddington," said Tom Whitaker, a local farmer whose daughter's pony had once been rehabilitated at Second Life. "That man's got some nerve." In the kitchen, an impromptu strategy session formed. Ideas ranged from fundraisers to legal challenges, but time was running out. "What if we bought Emperor?" suggested Mary Ann, who taught at the local high school. "Could we raise enough?" Sarah shook her head. "He's not selling. This is about his pride." Outside, oblivious to the adults' concerns, Lizzie had taken Emperor for his daily water therapy. The stallion moved with increasing confidence in the pond, his injured leg now bearing weight in the buoyancy of the water. "You're getting stronger," she told him softly. "Soon you won't need me at all." Emperor nickered gently, nudging her wheelchair with his muzzle. When Sarah approached, she was struck by the scene, the massive racehorse moving delicately beside the girl in the wheelchair, both navigating their limitations with quiet dignity. "Lizzie," she called, "there are some people here who want to help us keep Emperor." Lizzie looked up, hope flickering across her face. "Really?" The meeting lasted into evening. Plans were made, contacts suggested. A local attorney offered pro bono services. By nightfall, Operation Emperor was in full swing, a community rallying around a horse and a farm that had given back so much. 3 days later, Sarah received the call she'd been dreading. Reddington's voice was cold. I understand you're attempting to challenge my ownership, he said without preamble. A foolish decision. We have documentation that your stable manager had authorization to surrender Emperor, Sarah countered, reciting the argument their attorney had prepared. Your amateur legal maneuvering is just delaying the inevitable, Reddington scoffed. I'll be there tomorrow to collect my deposit and inspect the horse. Any further obstruction will result in immediate repossession. After hanging up, Sarah sank into a kitchen chair, the weight of defeat heavy on her shoulders. Their legal challenge was built on technicalities that might not hold up, and the fundraiser had only gathered half the needed amount. She found Lizzie in Emperor's stall, reading aloud from Black Beauty. The stallion stood attentively beside her wheelchair, head lowered as if listening. He's coming tomorrow, isn't he? Lizzie asked without looking up. Yes, Sarah admitted, but we're still fighting. Lizzie closed the book, her expression suddenly changing from sorrow to determination. Then I have an idea. It might be our only chance. What kind of idea? Sarah asked cautiously. We need to show everyone who Emperor really is now, Lizzie explained, her words tumbling out faster. Not just as a racehorse, but as something more. I don't understand, honey. Lizzie's eyes shone with purpose. The spring fair. It's this weekend, right? What if we could show everyone what Emperor can do? What we can do together? Sarah frowned. Lizzie, he's still recovering. And you've never even ridden a... Not riding, Lizzie interrupted. Something different. Something that shows he's not just a racehorse anymore. He's... She paused, searching for the words. He's a healer. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance as another storm approached. Emperor's ears twitched, but he remained calm, his eyes fixed on Lizzie. It's dangerous, Sarah warned. For both of you. So is doing nothing, Lizzie replied, her hand resting on Emperor's scarred leg. Please, and Sarah. Trust me. The storm drew closer, but neither horse nor girl showed any fear now. The morning of the spring fair arrived with golden sunshine and a gentle breeze, perfect weather for the annual community celebration. Sarah loaded Emperor into the trailer with unsteady hands. The past 24 hours had been a whirlwind of preparation, hope, and fear. Reddington's inspection the previous day had been tense. He'd examined Emperor with clinical detachment, noting the horse's improved condition with a calculating eye. He's healing well, he'd observed. Excellent. I'll expect him at my Kentucky facility next Monday. When Sarah mentioned the fair, he'd laughed dismissively. Do what you want with my property until then. Just remember, any further damage comes out of your pocket. Now, as they pulled into the fairgrounds, Sarah wondered if they were making a terrible mistake. Emperor hadn't been around crowds since his racing days, and Lizzie's mysterious plan still made Sarah nervous. The fairgrounds bustled with activity, food vendors, carnival games, and local farmers showing livestock. A modest arena stood at the center, surrounded by bleachers already filling with spectators for the day's events. Helen met them at the designated area, helping unload Emperor, who stepped down remarkably steadily despite his still healing leg. How's our boy doing? Helen asked, running expert hands along Emperor's leg. Better than me, Sarah admitted. I keep thinking about everything that could go wrong. Sometimes you have to leap before you look, Helen replied, glancing toward Lizzie, who was being helped from the truck by Tom Whitaker. News of their situation had spread, and a small crowd gathered as Emperor was led to the preparation area. Sarah noticed several local reporters and even a camera crew from the regional news station. We're up after the 4-H presentation, Lizzie explained, her face flushed with excitement. About 20 minutes. Honey, you still haven't told me exactly what you're planning, Sarah said, kneeling beside the wheelchair. Lizzie smiled mysteriously. Just trust us. Nearby, Emperor stood calmly despite the noise and activity around him, a far cry from the terrified, injured animal they'd brought home weeks earlier. As they waited, Sarah spotted a familiar black SUV pulling into the parking area. Reddington had arrived, accompanied by 2 men in suits who looked like attorneys. Quite the spectacle you've arranged, he commented coldly, approaching their group. Though I fail to see the point of this sentimental display. You will, Lizzie replied with unexpected confidence. Before Reddington could respond, the announcer called for the next presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lizzie Collins and Emperor in a special demonstration of therapeutic horsemanship. Tom and another volunteer helped Lizzie into the arena, Emperor following behind, his gait still slightly uneven but strong. Sarah stood at the entrance, heart pounding. The arena fell silent as the audience noticed Lizzie's wheelchair. Emperor walked beside her without a lead rope, perfectly in step with the wheelchair's pace. Lizzie began to speak, her voice amplified by the microphone Tom had affixed to her chair. 6 months ago, I lost my parents in an accident that took away my ability to walk. 2 months ago, Emperor lost his racing career in an accident that nearly took his life. The crowd listened intently as Lizzie continued. Most people thought we were both broken beyond repair. Maybe we are broken, but we're not worthless. She positioned her wheelchair in the center of the arena, then made a subtle hand gesture. Emperor walked several paces away, turned, and stood waiting. Emperor doesn't see me as a girl in a wheelchair, Lizzie said, and I don't see him as just a racehorse. With another signal, Emperor approached and lowered himself carefully to the ground beside her, his movements deliberate and controlled despite his injury. There was an audible gasp from the audience. Seeing such a powerful animal make himself vulnerable was unexpected. Lizzie reached into her pocket and produced a small brush. With gentle strokes, she began grooming Emperor's mane. The stallion closed his eyes, completely at ease. At Second Life Farm, animals like Emperor get a chance to become something new, Lizzie continued, her voice growing stronger. They heal, and in healing, they help others heal too. She signaled again, and Emperor rose to his feet. What happened next left the audience breathless. Lizzie extended her arms, and Emperor stepped forward, lowering his head to her level. In a carefully practiced movement, he slipped his neck under her arms, allowing her to wrap them around him. Then, with incredible gentleness, he lifted his head, raising Lizzie slightly from her wheelchair. For a brief, magical moment, the girl was suspended in what almost looked like standing, supported by the horse's strength. Her face glowed with joy. "This is therapeutic horsemanship," Lizzie announced as Emperor carefully lowered her back into her chair. Emperor isn't just a racehorse anymore. He's a healer, a teacher, a friend. The arena erupted in applause. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes, overwhelmed by what she had witnessed, not just a demonstration, but a transformation. As Lizzie and Emperor exited the arena, a reporter approached Reddington. "Mr. Reddington, is it true you're planning to reclaim this therapy horse for breeding purposes?" Cameras turned toward him. For once, the composed businessman looked uncomfortable. That is, my property rights are legally sound," he stammered. Another reporter jumped in. "Would you comment on the petition being circulated by the Therapeutic Riding Association to keep Emperor at Second Life Farm? They've already gathered over 2,000 signatures." Reddington's face darkened as he realized the public relations nightmare unfolding. More cameras. More questions. The story was rapidly spinning beyond his control. Later, as they prepared to load Emperor for the journey home, Reddington approached alone, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Collins," he began stiffly. "It appears I've underestimated the community interest in this situation." Sarah waited, saying nothing. "My attorneys advised me that contested ownership could become complicated," he continued. "Perhaps an arrangement could be reached." "What kind of arrangement?" Sarah asked cautiously. "A long-term loan," Reddington suggested. "Emperor remains legally mine, but stays in your care for the therapeutic program. It would be beneficial to my company's community relations portfolio." Sarah glanced at Lizzie, who was feeding Emperor apple slices nearby. "And the deposit?" "Consider it a donation to your program," Reddington replied, already backing toward his vehicle. "My office will be in touch with the paperwork." As he drove away, Helen approached with a broad smile. "Did I just witness a miracle?" "No," Sarah replied, watching Lizzie and Emperor. "You witnessed something stronger than pride or profit. You witnessed love." 1 year later, Second Life Farm hosted its first official therapeutic riding open house. A new ramp led to the expanded stable area, and a proper mounting platform stood beside the training ring. Emperor, now fully healed though still bearing scars, greeted visitors with regal calmness. 6 other therapy horses had joined the program, but he remained special, the stallion who had sparked it all. Lizzie, now 13, had become the program's junior instructor, her wheelchair customized with special attachments for working with the horses. Her laughter, once so rare, now filled the farm regularly. As Sarah watched her niece guiding a nervous young boy through his first interaction with Emperor, she reflected on their journey. They had all been broken in different ways: a horse without purpose, a girl without hope, a woman without direction. Now, in each other, they had found something better than wholeness. They had found purpose. Second chances, Sarah murmured to herself, sometimes come with 4 legs. Emperor, hearing her voice, lifted his head and nickered softly in agreement.